Good morning and Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah portion has the famous commandment, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. And of course the question is, how can we love our neighbor like ourselves? And if we love our neighbors as ourselves, what does that require us to do? And how are we required to act in a manner that we love our neighbors as ourselves? There is a story told about a businessman who was traveling with one of his employees on an overseas trip, and he took ill, and unfortunately his situation became graver and graver, and he was looking like he was going to pass away. And he said to his employee, I want you to go back and tell my wife the terrible news and take care of my wife, and you can give my wife whatever you want. Well, unfortunately, he passes away, and the employee travels back, breaks the terrible news to the wife. Then he says, your husband said, I can give you whatever I want from the business, so I'm going to give you 10% of the business. The wife says, 10%? It was my husband's business. You were just his employee. Why would you get 90%? And the employee said, well, that was your husband's instructions. He says you could give my wife whatever you want. So she took him to the rabbi. The rabbi listened to both sides, and the rabbi ruled that he has to give her 90% of the business, and he keeps 10%. He said, what do you mean? He said, I could give his wife whatever I want. And the rabbi said, exactly. What he said was, whatever you want for yourself, that's what you should give my wife. Give my wife whatever you want. Since you want 90%, that's the amount you should give his wife. Love your neighbor as yourself means wish for your neighbor, want for your neighbor whatever you want for yourself. The litmus test of how to treat someone else and how to act under the commandment of love your neighbor as yourself is ask yourself, what would I want to be done if the circumstances were reversed? What would I want for myself? And then do unto others what you want others to do unto you. Israel is now facing a dilemma. In order to destroy Hamas, they need to go into Rafah. As someone said, not going into Rafah is like putting out 80% of a fire. But unfortunately, the Biden administration told Israel that if they go into Rafah, they will withhold ammunition. In this week's Torah portion, the commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, teaches us that America should ask itself, what would you do if you were in this circumstance? If you had a terrorist organization bent on your destruction with two other terrorist organizations, namely Hezbollah and Iran, watching how you respond to Hamas's attack of October 7th, would you let Hamas remain standing, or would you finish the job? If Hamas was on the border of America, sitting in Canada, God forbid, would you allow them to continue to exist as a terrorist entity, or would you do whatever it takes to wipe them out so never again can there be another attack on American soil? Well, whatever your conclusion is, that's the way you should deal with Israel, your ally, your friend, and allow Israel to rid itself from this enemy on its border. Furthermore, not only are there Israeli hostages, there are American hostages being held by Hamas. What message, if you, President Biden, was a hostage being held in Gaza for 7 months, in dark tunnels, starving, what message would you want America to send to Hamas? Would you want them to send the message of, it's okay, we're not going to let Israel come get you, we're withholding arms, so you don't have to release the hostages? Or would you want to stand with Israel so that Hamas should capitulate and surrender and give up the terrorists? Just ask yourself that question and then act accordingly. The answer for Israel is to look at what a 20-year-old Israeli girl did last night. She went on stage as Eurovision, Idan Golan, and despite all the haters, all the anti-Semitic threats and death threats that she received since she entered into this contest, despite all the booing at her competition, with grace, with charm, with beauty, with elegance, she stood up and represented Israel as a proud Jew and as a proud Israeli. And she went on to win and go to the finals of the Eurovision. And God willing, she should win the Eurovision competition and show the world that while they come at us with hate and with anti-Semitism, We will hold our heads high as proud Jews, and we will show them that we will prevail over the hate with our song, with our music of love, which has been the ballad of the Jewish people ever since our existence. Doesn't matter what the world says, matters what we Jews do. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom.